Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Autodesk Virtual Academy, brought to you by your good friends here at KETIV Technologies. I'm Nigel Mbayak, your host for today and every other day, except for 2 weeks ago when Eric did it.
That's right.
And today I'm joined by Eric Paul.
Again.
Good
morning, everyone.
Nice. Good morning, Eric. Today we're going to be going over something I think is really important, right? So a lot of people come to me and Eric as well talking about, how do I automate my products? How do I automate my designs? How do I automate my drawings, right? How do I make these things happen faster so I can use my time working on, innovation of my designs or working on a new design entirely? Well, part is using iLogic and some of the automation using things like the Inventor API, things that Eric can speak to much better than I can. But another consequence of using something like that is, like, ultimately you're going to write all of this code. What do you do when you run into an error? What happens when it doesn't do what you're expecting it to do? And Eric has seen his fair share and used his fair share of four-letter words in response to his particular iLogic code. So I figured it would be a good idea to have all of you listen to some of the techniques and some of the mentality Eric has when he's troubleshooting some of this automation code that he builds on a pretty much a daily basis.
Yep. It's true.
I don't think there's anyone better at KETIV who can help you guys with this, because Eric probably runs into the most errors because he writes the most code. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type those into the chat panels at any time. And I think I'll just go ahead and let Eric run away with this.
All right, great. So really today I'm going to be going over some of the tips and tricks, techniques, different ways of dealing with, hey, I've got an error. I need to figure out why it's happening. Or, I was expecting this value and I'm getting something else. A range of options to really narrow down what's going on, why is this happening. And so I'm going to be sharing some of my tips and tricks. Anyone who's joining, if you have others that you think I missed as we're going on, love to hear it and share with the rest of everybody so we can all get the best information on that. So the things I'm going to be covering today. Now, Nigel, have you ever used the iLogic debugger before?
I mean, my iLogic debugger is Eric.
That's true.
So technically, yes, but the iLogic debugger in the program, no.
And that's because, unfortunately, there is no debugger with iLogic. If you were used to, pre-iLogic and you're using the VBA Editor, or maybe you did stuff in AutoCAD, there is actually a debugger with that. When you're using the iLogic setup, there is no real debugger. So we just have to make our own. And, the way we do that here is mostly with these three items. You've got message boxes, TryCatch statements, and commenting out code. And I'll kind of go over all of this in depth if you don't know what any of these terms are. So the very first thing I'm going to start with today, let's see here, where did that go? Here we are, is I'm going to explain commenting. So you might be familiar, hopefully, I really hope you're familiar with adding comments to your code where you're kind of explaining what you're doing in your code and why. I'm here on the Microsoft VB.net site. You may or may not be familiar with this, but everything that's written within iLogic is using the VB.net language. So I think something like 99% of what's built into VB.net, you're able to access when you're writing your iLogic code. So I'm very often going to Microsoft's site, getting a little more information on everything there, and I would highly recommend you do the same. Just make sure you're adding VB.net to your search string when you're looking stuff up. So again, with the commenting, usually what it's used for is to have text in your code that's something that's not going to run. Obviously this first line here, this isn't a valid programming, let's call it sentence. The next one is, you can set a text box's text to a specific, high string. Sure, that's text. but this comment afterwards, that's not something we want the program to actually pick up. So we comment it out using the single apostrophe for VB.NET. So what you may not be familiar with is using that to not have code run. So today I'm going to be going over some of the previous examples that I've shown you guys. So if you're interested at all in that code, take a look at these other examples I've done in the past. Let me just give an example here of and before I actually show it to you, I'm going to run this. So I have this build rule that should run both of these other rules that I've got here. And when I go ahead and run this, oh man, we got an error already. It's like, I can't find it. And if you have, I've seen this before, people with 50, 60 different iLogic rules in here, it can be an issue trying to find it. Hey, why is this wrong? Is there an extra space? Is there, there can be all sorts of reasons that it's wrong. One of the things you can do if you're just trying to get through something and, you're trying to figure out, hey, why is this error happening? What you can do is you can comment out sections. So that message box there, the error, it said, hey, something's wrong with component replace. I couldn't run that rule. So if I'm not sure why, I'll comment it out, this line, because that's where I think comment replace, there's something wrong with it. So I'll go ahead and save that, run it, and I'll see if it completes now. And since it has completed, since we commented that out and it's not trying to run it and it succeeds, now I know, hey, something's going on with this exact line, because once I took it out, it worked. So what I'll do here is I'll bring it back in and I'll start reading, okay, so what's the difference here? So I know it's supposed to be component replace, and I look back here, oh yeah, I renamed it as backup. So let me just add that to the string so that now they actually match. Save that. Now run the rule again. And hey, now it's actually making it through. All right, so that's one of the ways that you can use commenting to sort things out with that. Another one is when your iLogic rules get very long, which happens often, sometimes you'll get an error that, man, you just have no idea where it's coming from. One of the things you can do, and I do myself, is if you check out this box here, it says comment out the selected lines. You can select a very large chunk of things, comment it all out, and maybe you can comment out the second half of your rule and see if you can narrow it down to, oh, okay, something's going wrong in this section. And then you can keep narrowing it down a little bit to, okay, maybe I'll allow more code to run, and see if you can narrow it down that way. The opposite button here of the comment out selected lines is the uncomment selected lines. And so you can see I push those, it brings them back. And if you do already have a comment, like, hello, Nigel, that's not how you spell your name. If you do the comment out lines, it'll add an additional comment out so that when you uncomment them, it'll leave this original comment.
Yeah, so you don't have to omit those lines or worry about the comments coming into your code.
Yeah.
If you use that. I remember I used to do that. I was like, oh, I only need to select this section. Skip the comment.
Exactly. All right. So the next thing I'm going to bring up here, let's see here. The next thing I'm going to talk about is message boxes. So you may or may not be familiar with those, but that is, boy, that is going to be your primary debugging tool when you're dealing with iLogic. What I'll do here is go ahead and give a little bit more explanation. Again, we're back on Microsoft's website here, and we're looking up this message box class. All right, and so I do recommend that you take a look at this yourself in the future. Don't have enough time to go over everything in here today, but you can see the basic setup for this right here is using message box dot show, and then you need to just put some text in. So let me give you an example. myself. There's a lot easier ways to do it. And let's go in here. So if you'll join me on, I think last time I used this example where we brought in things from Excel. One of the things you might be interested as you're, setting up your iLogic and setting up the whole project is, hey, I want to see what things are actually being loaded up as I am running this code. So what we're going to do here is inside this loop, so each time it's going and trying to change these parameters, I want to see the parameter name so I can see, is it actually trying to do the right thing here. So what I'm going to do is messagebox.show. And again, if you're on Inventor 2018.2 and later, you do have this IntelliSense that shows you, what you're going to need as you're typing things out. So that's a really nice thing as well. So we can see here, all it needs is some text to go in there. So normally text looks something like this, right? So you've got something in, double quotes on the beginning of end, and now you have a string. And what I actually want, though, is the name of the parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and take that variable, since I know that's a string variable. And now each time it runs through this, I'm going to have a message box pop up and give me the name of that value that's coming in. So I'm going to close this. Let's go ahead and run it. And now we can see, okay, the first parameter, whole size, whole height. Does that match my user parameters? Well, it does 2 of them, but I don't get all 3. And so that's going to take us into the next section, which I'll explain why that's happening. And one of the other things that I want to explain today is what's known as a TryCatch statement. So again, we're back into the Microsoft site. Again, take a look at this on your own for a much deeper dive into it. But the concept is sometimes you're going to get an error in your code and you either want to deal with it, at that time, and sometimes you're going to want to continue on with the code even though you got that error. Maybe you know what that error is and it's okay. So that's what we have set up here in this rule. We have this try, catch, and end try. So everything that's within this try section, in these lines below, if any error happens, it's going to go directly to the catch portion and run whatever code is in the catch portion. So in this case, I don't have anything set up yet. So what I will do here is I'm going to add a new message box and figure out, okay, when there is an error, I want to know what user parameter is currently selected when that error happens, right? So now I should have a message box for success and for failure. So let me run this. Now we've got model number, whole size, whole height. And hey, now we've got all 3. But I don't know actually when they succeeded or failed. So we need to add a little bit more information to that, right? So I'm going to go over here to the string data type. Again, we're back into that VB.NET information. And I'm going to try to figure out, hey, is there any way I can add on information to what I'm putting in there? And as you get in here, you can see that there's some information about, hey, it looks like we can have a section of a string, and then it's this ampersand that'll combine that with another portion of a string. So I'm going to go ahead and try that out here. I'm going to go into this rule, And I'm going to say parameter name and success. Oh, forgot the quotes. And down below, I'm going to say parameter name and failure. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run this. And okay, so now we can see, hey, it just jams it straight on there. That's not very, readable. Let's add, let's add a space. That's really important, is that, as you're adding this, you really have to deal with white space to make it look readable. We add those spaces in, and okay, that's a little bit more readable now. Now, sometimes you're going to have a bunch of information coming in at once, and maybe you kind of want to use this message box as, kind of a report of, hey, here's how we're currently doing, here's all the stuff that's showing up. One of the things you can do is you can add a carriage return so that you have something on multiple lines. And so I'm actually going to reformat this a bit. Instead of having that go after it, I'm going to say, we're going to start it off with parameter success, or succeeded. I don't know how to spell, but that's fine. And I'm going to add the ampersand. But before I get to the parameter name, I'm going to add a carriage return. And for VB.NET, that is VB carriage return, CR, VBCR. All right, so add that here. And then we can say failed. We'll take off this last section. And all right, save that. Let's run this now. Okay, now we can see we've got multiple lines here. So this is maybe a little bit more readable. So it says parameter failed, model number. There we go, parameter succeeded. We've got it on multiple lines. Cool. Now we're coming in there. All right. So one of the other things we can do is, okay, we have the name, but maybe we want the value as well, right? So let's say parameter dot, I believe toString will give us the value of it. Let's find out. So now we should have the name of it. Got angry with me. There we go. No, not quite. I think it's just not knowing it's a parameter, and I'm pretty sure value will do it. Let's find out. There we go. So now we've got parameter failed. Here's the name of the parameter, and here's the value. Because sometimes it's really important to know, hey, when it failed, it had this exact value. Maybe sometimes you're dealing with the same parameter multiple times throughout your code, and it grows and it shrinks, and this is applied, that's applied. You want to keep track of where exactly is this number at when it failed. So that's another thing you can add in there to your little report. All right, so that's going to be really the backbone of what you're going to be trying to do for troubleshooting here. A lot of the times, what I'll also do, if I'm not exactly sure when something fails, sometimes I'll be dealing with the same object, say 10, 20 times throughout my piece of code, and I'm not exactly sure when that particular thing failed. Sometimes I will just add a message box after every chunk of code. So maybe I'll say 1. And now I'll know that, that my setup worked correctly. And I'll add another one after this important Excel routine. And then maybe I'll add a final one to say, hey, we actually made it through. And if I got this finished message box, that means I actually made it through. Sometimes you're not sure if it crashed and it just, nothing happened and it give you an error, it just didn't complete. So sometimes that's important to have in there. so you can know you actually made it to the end. So now when you run it, it's like, okay, I set up my parameters, it made it through the Excel sheet, okay, and here's my message boxes about how things are going in the loop, and okay, we made it through. So that can be a really important thing to try, that maybe you'll make it through partway, and you made it to number 1 and 2, but you didn't make it all the way to finished. It can really narrow down what line you're having your issue on. Let's see. Another thing we can try here is with this message box, one of the options that you have is to display buttons on there. You can say, maybe as you're debugging it, sometimes you want to continue on, sometimes you don't, right? And so you can actually add message boxes to say, if everything is going right, do you want to cancel it or do you want to keep going? And then you can make decisions based off of that result. So you can see this example here, right? So if the person clicks yes, then I want this thing to happen. Or if the person clicks no, maybe you want the whole rule to stop running completely. And so that's another really interesting and helpful way that you can use message boxes to really narrow down what's happening and have control over your troubleshooting there. All right, so that is the stuff I wanted to cover today. Nigel, did anyone have any questions come in, or any comments from anyone else about stuff that they do?
There's some stuff. I think there's some things that we need to address, like support cases.
Okay.
And such, but we can do that at a later time.
Gotcha. Yeah, and these are things I really use daily. Anytime I'm creating an iLogic, thing, I'm using all 3 of these tools constantly. So I do really recommend you guys check out the VB.net, kind of more in depth on the message box, the TryCatches. So you can kind of get more tools in your toolbox as you guys are working things out.
Absolutely. And people are like, I have to learn VB and iLogic? Well, not really, because they're almost one and the same. I think 99, in the 90%, I would say.
So when you're writing iLogic, you're already writing it in VB.net. So this is just giving you more information about the environment you're working in.
Yeah, so ultimately, it's not like you have to learn 2 things, right? It's like
you
are learning iLogic and you are using VB to do it. So if you wanted to use the VB editor, I guess you certainly could.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of long form ways you can connect things up.
Yep.
But yeah. All right.
Yeah. Let's see what we got here. Mario's asking, he has an external rule that resides in the vault, so it's vaulted, but the workstations have different vault working folders. Is there a way to make it so that the path on the rule is relative? I don't think so.
I don't think so. But what you could do is you could add multiple places to look for external rules. Are we talking about just picking up the external rule in the first place? Like, is it there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if that's the case, right, you can just select more than one location
to look for external rules. Yeah.
You can do a loop through the whole alphabet.
No, you don't need to do that. You just need to set, for each inventor user, as you in the environment, you can set up where to look for your external rules. Let's see. Haven't done that in a while, but let me see if I can bring it up. Where was all the external rule stuff? Yeah, so, part of this setup here, you can manually add where you're looking for rules, and so that might be something that you do. If people have a different, default location for your vaulted stuff, per user, you can change that.
Yep. What else we got? Another question's like, can I write this stuff in like not iLogic and VB? It's like,
Yes.
yeah.
Actually, yes. So if you have a really strong VBA background, maybe, and maybe not so much VB.net, there's kind of two parts to that. First of all, VB.net, I feel, is a much easier language to learn than VBA. So if you already know VBA, it'll be a pretty easy transition to VB.net. But one of the other things you can do if you already know VBA, maybe you know both languages, is there is actually still a VBA editor here. And as you can see for some of my other drawings I have open here, I actually have some VBA code that you can run directly from an iLogic rule. So in fact, that's actually what I did in one of my previous AVAs here.
Yeah.
If I go back to this one and edit this rule, you can see this rule, all it does is run this VBA macro. And so it calls out exactly where it is. And if I open up the VBA editor again, we can see, oh, hey, here's that thing we're looking at. So if you're much stronger in VBA, you can actually use the VBA debugger here, and that's nice.
Yeah.
You just won't have access to those iLogic specific shortcuts and helpers. You'll have to be doing just Inventor API. And there is some pretty serious documentation on that. I highly, highly recommend anybody who's looking at anything iLogic, Inventor, programming, take a look at this programming API help. It's a really, really good resource. They really documented things very well.
Yeah, it's there's so much stuff there.
Yeah.
And then just print El Gianto chart for.
Yes, there's an API chart that kind of explains how everything's connected, and this whole thing is also available online. So if you don't have Inventor available to you, when you're working on this, or maybe you just want it open on your other monitor and you don't want this open, you can look at it all online as well.
Yep. I know where the external rules are because Cameron told us.
Thanks, Cameron. Where are we at?
It's tools app options, and then it should be in there. There should be a drop down for iLogic.
So application options, and let's see here. It's been a while since I've been in here. Not in there.
Oh, does the panel tile have one? Yeah.
There it is.
El
Thanks,
Ribone.
Cameron. Yeah. So now you can add external rule directories here. So if you have other spots you want to be looking from, go ahead and just click the add directory, and it'll look in all those different spots for these file types. So whether it's .vb, maybe it's something you wrote in your Visual Studio because you find it easier to do that, and then bring it in here. That's fine. If it's .text, if it's something you wrote within the iLogic VB editor, it's all good. You can bring it all in through here, and it'll pick that up.
Sweet. Cameron, you're the man.
Yep.
Cam the man. That's what we're going to call him now.
I do see another question coming in here about related to the Inventor API chart. Is there an API chart for VB.net, or would be too massive? Yeah, it would kind of be too massive. But what Microsoft does have is what we're looking at here. For VB.net, we are looking at the API browser right here. So take a look at this, and you can see it's big. So they've got everything in here. It's searchable. It's not just the names here, it's keywords. So I'd highly recommend taking a look at this, and that should get you what you need.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I've watched Eric Eric uses 8 gigabytes in Chrome. Don't have 50 tabs open. Eric has all of these in open tabs, and
Absolutely.
I'm like, go find that, please. And it takes him about 3 minutes to do so. So don't do that. But I'm gonna go ahead and give everyone another minute or so to ask any more questions. Eric, if you could go to KETIV.com/eventos. So KETIV.com/events for those people who are, I guess, wanting to come to live events or wanting to see more webinars, things along those lines. If you go to KETIV.com/events, it is updated all the time by our marketing folks, and they're always putting new stuff in here. Specifically, there's an Inventor Insider event that's happening in a couple of months.
Yeah, that'll be cool. I'm guessing anyone who's on for this thing may be a little bit more interested in some of the more new features, obscure features, interesting features.
Stuff they want to put in.
Yeah, you definitely want to check this out.
Yeah, so go to KETIV.com/events, make, I guess, like ingrain that into your mind and occasionally check there to see if there's any live events coming. Or just check your email frequently. We'll send those that way as well. So, cool. Any last questions? This is your last chance, people, to talk to my iLogic debugger himself, Eric Paul. Or Cameron, I guess. Cameron's online too.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron.
If I wanted to make a bolted tank, how would you go about doing that?
All right.
I think that's just about everything, guys. So again, thanks, Eric, for being part of our AVA today.
Absolutely.
For those of you who do have KETIV Streamline, or what was formerly VaultCare, there is a iLogic productivity session for those customers, those Streamline and I guess formerly VaultCare customers, that Eric will be teaching in a couple of weeks here. It's about 4 hours long, going over some more advanced iLogic functionality.
Yep.
If that's something you're interested in, let us know. If you're a Streamline customer, I can get you in. If you're not a Streamline customer, let me know and I can see what I can do about it.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend anyone who's interested. This will be for people who have at least used it before. So if you haven't, we do have videos of our last one for people who are brand new. But this will be more geared towards people who have at least used it some.
Yes. Cool. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Eric, we will talk to you soon. And to answer that question that just came through, is this iLogic productivity webinar going to be online? It is online and in person for people who have KETIV Streamline. If you don't, let me know and I can see if I can pull some strings. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and we will see you again next week, Thursday at 10 a.m. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Bye-bye.